Welcome to Locked On Heat. Tobin is here. So is Jimmy Butler. Let's jump in.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. Whether you're tuning in on YouTube or your favorite podcast app, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg here with Brendan Tobin. You know him from Tobin and Leroy, 10 to 2 p.m. Monday through Friday on 560 WQAM. You also know him from being the one to ask Pat Riley the question that might have been the reason for Jimmy Butler no longer being here. We're going to talk all things Jimmy Butler's return. Before we jump in, though, Tobin, I am going to put you on blast a little bit. I am not being a good host, I suppose, here. But I am going to put you on blast a little bit to start. Here's the question. For those who need a reminder, here's your question that prompted Riley to tell Jimmy to keep his mouth shut.
Pat, this weekend, Jimmy Butler had said, if he was healthy, that Boston would have gone home. I know it's tough to live in hypotheticals, but if he was able to play and Terry was able to play, did you feel like the gulf has gotten way too big with you in Boston, or if you had your guys, that it might have been more competitive?
For him to say that, I thought, is that Jimmy trolling or is that Jimmy serious? If you're not on the court playing against Boston or on the court playing against the New York Knicks, you should keep your mouth shut.
So I have a ton of questions. We have not, I don't think, talked about this. If we did, it's a very long time ago in person. But what is it like to know that you might be responsible for Jimmy Butler not being here anymore?
I don't like any of this. I don't like what you've done here. I feel ambushed. I felt like you and I are friends. This is one thing for, some Heat versus, whoever on Twitter to do this, but for you to do this, Wes, it hurts me. I already have to deal with this every day on the radio show from everybody. How does it feel? Not great, dude. It doesn't feel great, and it didn't feel great in the moment because I wasn't expecting the answer to go that direction. Because it really wasn't the point of my question. Wasn't to ask like, hey, Jimmy said this, were you pissed he said it? It was more to ask, Jimmy said this because he thinks that if he played, they would have won. Does Pat think that if he had his roster, you guys could stack with Boston? And, he just, he went on this whole thing about giving the Celtics their flowers, but obviously Jimmy had drawn his ire, and that's where it went. So do I feel some sense of responsibility? No, because I'm not responsible for Pat Riley's words. This was like the time when I asked him about the 2020 finals, and like he said the term asterisk after a 4-minute answer. And then they had to put out a statement that said the asterisk was on our side, not the Lakers side. It's like, what am I supposed to do? I'm just sitting here, just throwing out a question. You know how it is being in those Riley pressers. You get one and done. So that's that. But I think mostly it's because he didn't want to pay him the money. I don't think it had to do with the fact that he told him to keep his mouth. If he didn't say keep his mouth shut and he still didn't pay him $110 million, does Jimmy Butler still do what he does? I still think he does.
So there's a bunch of stuff that I want to get to there. But first of all, you're exactly right. If Pat Riley tells him to keep his mouth shut and then gives him the contract extension, I think Jimmy's still here. Right? But I also don't think because you asked the question, Pat Riley decided in that moment not to give Jimmy Butler the extension. I think everybody kind of knew probably where this thing was going. Maybe not to the point of how it ended and when it ended.
Well, yeah, it's like that wasn't the first Jimmy Butler question. He had said already in that press conference that we're going to have to take a look at that. He's got to be more available. Obviously, Jimmy was like the number one guy who got the ire of that press conference, which is like what I keep going back to. People don't want to hear it because like I knew in that moment when he said, I'm like, oh, no, that's going to go crazy. Because you know how it is. Like everyone's going to tweet it out. Like
when
just
that
keep
happened,
your mouth shut.
The room went quiet. You could hear a pin drop. It was like when Jimmy Butler came out in the beginning of January and was like, I can't find joy on the basketball court anymore. Everybody just knew in that moment and we're like, oh, here we go. This is the whole thing. This is going to be not just the story down here, but the story nationally, and it's going to be what everybody's talking about. And I want to go back to your question, though, because it is a good question. And I know you didn't mean to draw that response from Riley. I think if anything, you were trying to maybe get the opposite of, hey, like, yeah, if Jimmy's out there, who knows? And I think we probably still have a chance this year as long as we're all healthy. You just never know how things are going to go, and with health or whatever. Like, it wasn't a softball, but I thought it was a good question that he could have kind of grabbed and taken in whatever direction. But he clearly wanted to say that. That was bothering him.
It was bothering him, but that's the whole point. Like, the whole point of being where they're at right now, and the one trump card that they had in all of it when they got gentlemen swept by Boston is, had Boston passed them by too far for this to all matter. And their whole point was, and even Andy Ellisberg made the point in the summer, was we traded for Terry Rozier. That was our big move. That was our big acquisition. And okay, if you feel that way, that was the whole point of it. Yes, I mentioned that that Jimmy had said, but Jimmy said that. What do you want me to do? If he goes out and he says, if I was here, Boston would have been home, trolling or not trolling, I would like to know what the president of basketball operations thinks of that claim. I think it's a fair question. And it goes back to like the last time I asked him, I was like, hey, did you think if Bam and Goran were healthy that you had a chance in the finals? That's why he said the term asterisk. That's the direction I was going. It wasn't to reprimand Jimmy Butler.
You have a knack for getting Pat Riley to say stuff. It's a skill.
I don't want to, because now everybody's mad at me. I'm gonna just I'll be at the next one, but I think I'm just gonna bow it out. I'm just gonna be like, no.
No, I think Pat will probably go, hey Tobin, you have any questions for me? Like, you specifically. Nope. I'm good.
Well, no, just I'm just kidding.
All right, so let's talk about that though. You think was this salvageable after Pat Riley had said all of that? Because Jimmy Butler's out here, and he told reporters recently when he was asked, hey, if Pat Riley had essentially extended the max contract extension to you after the press conference, do you think you'd still be in Miami? And Jimmy Butler just said no. And I got to be honest, I don't know that I believe him, because it always just felt like the money was number one. And, Pat Riley is central in the Heat organization, but if the star player is getting paid what he wants to get paid and he's happy, I can't imagine that the president of basketball operations would impact one thing that the president of basketball operations says would impact whether or not Jimmy Butler wants to be there, as long as he's getting paid like a star player.
I definitely think that Jimmy Butler doesn't start tanking the season in the middle of it if he's paid. I think, like, my whole thing of it is because, we've dissected this left and right. My big line of demarcation in all of it was that OKC game where he turns the ankle and then is sick. Right. My whole thing is, I think in that moment, Jimmy Butler decided, I'm not putting my body on the line for this team anymore, because I'm not risking my health until I get $100 million guaranteed anymore. Right. So I don't think if he's paid, he does it. Does that mean that he doesn't get pissed eventually because the Heat aren't contenders anymore? I can't rule that out. I mean, maybe that happens, but I don't think he's actively out here like dogging it. So I think that the extension would have been a bit of a Band-Aid, but if the team was still dealing with some of the issues that it did, it still could have gotten to a point where things are ugly, because obviously there was something festering, especially the Heat side of it, where they were sick of all the extra stuff they had given Jimmy, and especially when it doesn't come with the reward of we got to the finals. So they got to deal with it the way that they thought was the right way to deal with it. And right now, unfortunately for them, they're in this time where it's like, you kind of just got to eat it right now. Like, it looks bad right now. You got to hope it doesn't end with him holding a trophy. And then if he ends up looking old at 37, then okay, your gamble was correct, but you got to hope in the early goings of it that he doesn't end up getting to the finish line. I guess that's the petty in all of them that I would imagine they got to feel right now.
It is, right? And obviously the Warriors have been really successful since they made the trade, and the Heat have not, right? With the 10-game losing streak and everything that's happened here. But at the same time, I don't think that Jimmy Butler's playing better or different. I just think he's in a situation that is better for him basketball-wise at the age that he's at. He's still a number 2 option, and his numbers are basically the same. He's playing the same way. I've even had people Warriors fans texting me and being like, has Jimmy always been this deferential? Like, has he always been this not aggressive kind of player for long swaths of a game and then kind of picked his spots? And I'm like, that's literally everything that he's been doing for the last 5 years. It just looks a lot better when you have a real number one option next to you in Steph Curry. And I know he's questionable for Tuesday night, but whatever. But like, for the most part, it just looks different when he's got that number one option. And the Heat, they failed at finding that number one option. They definitely deserve blame for that. Nobody's saying that they don't, but I don't know. This idea that Jimmy Butler is just all of a sudden better in Golden State. I push back against that. He's certainly better in Golden State than what he was when he was not trying for the last month in Miami, but for the most part, he's basically been the same player.
You couldn't have a more ideal scenario for a start of a career than Jimmy Butler, because you have him back contending with something new. He is paid, and he basically has to have a 35-game sprint to the playoffs. I mean, give me a more ideal Jimmy Butler scenario than that. There's not. Basketballs. And I say this, for anybody who thinks I'm a Jimmy Butler hater, I said to pay him. I was for paying Jimmy Butler, and I am the one who bought into all that. It's worth the playoff flip the switch to deal with all the other stuff, which the organization didn't. But I think it was UD who said it pretty recently, who was like, hey, you're kind of in the post shot of whiskey phase of it right now. They are obviously humming. They're not, they got a shot in that West because the West is weird as hell. And you got Steph Curry and you got Draymond. And yeah, you sprinkle in there one of the best postseason players of the last half decade. Of course, that's going to have a puncher's chance, especially who the hell knows? Shea twists an ankle. Something happens to the OKC Thunder. Maybe the playoffs are weird. Things happen. But, that's why I say, like, the Heat got to hope that his, that this is going to be the best punch that they have at this thing, and that he does age, because there does come a risk with the way he plays basketball, which I think everybody's now realizing is throw your neck at the rim, get a bunch of free throws, but there are going to be times where you're like, all right, is he ready to roll here in this quarter? No, not really. It's funny watching like Twitter on him sometimes, because people are like, I don't get it. He hasn't done anything. He's not doing anything. And then it's like, oh yeah, then he'll flip the switch and go crazy. So, that just kind of shows you, I think, when you play on the stage that the Warriors have, like how much more national they are right now than the Heat. And when you have Steph Curry, who's obviously a rock star, that'll happen.
Yeah. I don't know if I agree with you that the Heat have to hope that he doesn't win a championship. I'm sure they do hope that he's not winning a championship just out of pettiness and just natural human emotion. But like, it wouldn't mean that they made the wrong decision to not pay him if he goes on in Golden State to win a championship. Just like you said, it's a great situation for him at this stage in his career. He's 35. He'll be 36 going into next season. Like, I just don't. I thought that the window had closed on the Jimmy Butler part of this basically at the end of last season. I just didn't. To your question to Pat Riley, I did think that the gulf between them and Boston was just too big, and there was no way to clear it. And then you're looking at the Knicks and the Pacers, even the Pistons, like the Magic, looking at teams that are just passing up the Heat in the standings and have more talent than them. I don't know. It wouldn't feel good if he went on to win a championship with the Warriors, but I also don't know that if he did that, it would mean that the Heat made the wrong decision by not paying him.
What are you, crazy? Of course that's what it means, dude. What do you mean if he ends up with a championship that means that they did? Yes, it does. That's literally the right and wrong of all this, of sports. There's no big picture. If he ends up with a trophy in Golden State, that's a disaster scenario for the Miami Heat, because you're basically, even if you don't have Steph Curry, you're basically saying, well, he couldn't do or move the needle on any team where it was going to be a thing. Like, at that point, if you have one of those guys who's still good enough to help you win, then you reshuffle the deck and you're supposed to figure out for the next 2 years how you're supposed to do it. So, of course, it's a disaster if he wins a championship.
That's fair to the point of, well, go get a number one next to Jimmy Butler, but they had failed over and over to do that. Who knows? I just you think if he wins in Golden State that it proves that he could have won in Miami?
Yes. Yeah,
but you would have to go and find a Steph Curry for Jimmy Butler.
Well, I don't think you have to find a Steph Curry. Like, I think this is the thing that's well, here's the thing that I disagree. I get in this argument with Leroy all the time about the idea of him being a number one. You need to put the right team around him. And the fair criticism that he has is they never found you could
That's right.
people could say it's the number one. The true thing is they never found the third piece that was perfect for him.
Yeah.
Tyler always got hurt or he wasn't ready. Like that's the thing that we always keep like looking over in all this stuff is in 2022 when they were the 1 seed, he had a pulled groin and he wasn't physically able to hold up in the playoffs. The next year, his wrist broke and they finally ran out of Magic Caleb Martin dust. And now you're taking on a team that is a nightmare matchup for Jimmy Butler. Mm-hmm. And you have nobody who can go shot for shot with Jamal Murray. So I don't agree that he wouldn't, because like we could have, if you had a team with Damian Lillard and Jimmy Butler, like they were supposed to, Jimmy Butler is Damian Lillard. Like who's the one, like who's the better player overall in the league? I would say most people would probably say at his best, probably Jimmy, just because he's a better two-way player and he's bigger, but Dame's going to be the number one scorer.
Right.
So like, I think we're splitting hairs. Like, I don't think it's necessarily number one. I think they never got the perfect guy to go next to him and Bam. And that's the big thing that kills you about it. Like those guys had a lot of success as a duo. The third guy they kept investing in just wasn't good enough or was never there and available. And quite frankly, since this whole thing has gone by, I don't know if Tyler's necessarily shown himself to be that guy again. Like, I think it's as great as his first half was. Now it's kind of like, hey, dude, this whole team's now, you wanted to be the face.
Right.
I kind of feel like there's more questions again of, is he that dude who's going to be like good enough to be a real piece to invest in winning? So I still think those questions are going to be there, but I don't know. This whole number one, I don't think they made the perfect final piece to get next to him. Could he have been their best guy? I think so. If they would have had a trustworthy scorer that they could put next to him, they never got him.
They needed somebody that was just going to take 20 shots a night and do it efficiently. Like they needed somebody that could legitimately take that off of Jimmy in the regular season and then let Jimmy do what he's going to do in the playoffs. But this whole battling out of the play-in tournament and doing that's, I think, the part that the Heat got upset by. And, you know, that's not news here. Pat Riley essentially said that in his press conference. But, you know, Damian Lillard would have been perfect, right? This is why Steph Curry is perfect. These guys are regular season superstars. Jimmy Butler was never a regular season superstar. He was a playoff superstar. He was a regular season okay player. And I don't think that's out of bounds to say that, right? Like, he was okay.
I mean, like Andrew Wiggins already has a 40-point game. Jimmy Butler never did that in the regular season. He's a weird player. He's not a
very strange player. But I
understand
think you and I
that.
are saying the same thing here. They didn't, like, Tyler Hero could be a piece, but he should be an Austin Reeves piece, not a Steph Curry piece.
He is, yeah. But I think it's one of those things where, like, if you got the right guy to carry that, like Jimmy Butler has what, like 8 40-point games in the playoffs. I think that's more than Tatum and Brown combined. Yeah. Like he's sensational when it gets to that point of the year. But there is a level, like once you didn't get to that point, once that whole summer of Cronin ended the way that it did and Drew Holiday ended up on Boston, it was over, dude. Like that's really when it was over.
I agree.
And even Jimmy saying, you know, trying to dial up the Hulkamania of it's that time. Like he couldn't do it that time. He physically did look like he was wearing down. So I understand the Heat's trepidation of paying him. It's not completely lost on me why they didn't want to do it. They always want to get out and not paying their superstars. That's how they're going to have that decision. Trust me, when Bam Adebayo is 34 years old, they're going to have these same debates of, you know, he doesn't stay in front of guys quite like he used to. And, you know, I don't know if we're going to pay Bam. Trust me, it'll happen because it's always going to happen with them and their stars.
So I want to look forward to Tuesday night. The way that Jimmy Butler is welcome, because very clearly the Heat fan base is very split on how everything went down here. I mean, it's absolutely crazy. Before I get to that, just a quick break, and then we're going to get to the poll. What do Heat fans think of what that environment is going to be like? We'll get to that next year on Locked On Heat. Welcome back to Locked On Heat. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Like and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app. Here with Tobin from WQAM 560. Tobin and Leroy, 10 to 2 p.m. Monday through Friday. So we put out a poll on the Locked On Heat Twitter account. How should Heat fans greet Jimmy Butler tomorrow in Miami? What do you think the response was? Do you think it was a majority cheers or a majority boos?
I'm gonna say majority cheers, just because they're stinking up the joint lately, the team.
That's a good reason. Yeah, 67% of the audience said cheers, 33% said boo Jimmy Butler. I think that's right. I think that's probably what we'll end up hearing on Tuesday night, and I think that's fine. Cheer the guy. You don't have to boo the guy. We very rarely see the guy get booed, right? LeBron got booed when he went back to Cleveland in 2010. Durant got booed when he went back to Oklahoma City with the whole cupcake thing. But we've seen this a million times. Usually the guys just get cheered.
Paul George got booed, didn't he?
Paul George
he got booed this year. He was very upset about that. I think that the only guy I've ever really seen get booed is Hassan Whiteside. Like, he came back and people were really bothered about that whole "we got shooters" thing. That can dribble. People were really bothered by that, and he was bothered by it afterwards because it hurt his feelings that people booed him. I think if this game would have been like right after everything happened, then there would have been a better chance for people to boo him. My theory has been this: one, the team stinks right now. Jimmy is going to get a montage that was confirmed today, so that's gonna give everybody the goosies, and is going to give people the reason to cheer him, and Mike Biamonte is going to give him the big open, and everyone's going to be feeling good. And is it insincere from the Heat? Yeah, maybe a little, but it's a bigger deal if they don't do it. And I think that the bigger deal is just to have closure after this thing is all over. Because even like some of the quotes I'm reading from Jimmy Butler today, I want to just put my head through a wall. I'm just like, all right, dude, it's
What's
enough.
What's the
quote
already that bothered you the most?
He said something today about like, I don't deserve all of the blame.
Okay, because that's the one I had queued up. Do you mind if I read it for the
Sure.
people who might have missed it? Okay. So he's asked about Heat fans who might be mad at him for the way that he ended. He says, quote, "I wonder if they look at the Heat the same way. It ain't like I was the one doing everything. It's got to be 50-50, maybe 51-49, the 51 towards me, but there's no way I was the cause of all of this," end quote. Was that the one you were talking about?
Yeah, that was that. I mean, like, first of all, one, people have been plenty pissed since he left, and I think have given the Heat plenty of blame. So that's for one. But for two, 51% is you dogging it against the Pelicans and the Pacers, and all of those games where you were half-assing it and having the sourpuss on your face on the end. That's 51%. No, dude, like, I'm sorry. You caused the split when it had to be split. It was a whole dog and pony show with you and your agent. Great job. You guys got to your end result. You're on a great team. You got your $100 million. So the ends, I guess, to them justify the means. But for anybody who is pissed, anybody in the organization is included, by my count, he still was getting paid until, the games he was getting suspended. I don't understand. I will never be like, oh, why are you guys so mad? You know why? What are you gaslighting me for, dude? You know exactly why we're all mad. That's such a silly thing. And I think that for that to also be in a spot where you're going to get a pretty warm welcome, I think. I think also part of it's going to be, I think there's going to be a ton of Warriors fans there as well. I think, Warriors are kind of a sneaky team that, even down here, like, Steph's a rock star. There's going to be a ton of Warriors jerseys on top of having the Jimmy support. He's going to barely feel any heckling or booing. Maybe some drunk guy says something while he's on the bench or something like that. But to be like, oh, I hope they know that they should be, I wasn't the cause of all of this. It's like, dude, come on. What are you talking about?
It's not that the Heat are without blame, as we've done. There's definitely blame, but it's not 51-49, man. It's like 80-20, maybe. Like, you didn't have to quit on the. He didn't have to quit on the team when he quit on the team. He didn't have to do it the way that he did it. You could wait until the offseason. And the thing that always stood out to me about all the Jimmy Butler stuff is usually you'll see players side with players in these instances, and every former player was against Jimmy Butler because they see he was making $50 million for the next 2 years, and they said, "Dude, you quit on the team." Like while you're making you're making $50 million a year. And with complaining about not being able to find joy on the court. At that moment, he lost a lot of sympathy.
With the safety net of a player's option for 50, whatever the hell it was, the next year too. $53
million, yeah.
Yeah, like I feel like I've been as much on, giving Jimmy his flowers and all of that stuff through all of this. But I was like, oh, all right, dude, we get it. You feel like you're not the bad guy. You're right. You want your side being hurt. It's like, dude, and here's the other thing. It's like, you either care or you don't care. Do you care or you don't care? So if you don't care, why do you care that the fan base make sure you give the Heat they're just doing this. Trust me, the fans have been plenty pissed, Jimmy. But do you care or do you not care? Right? Like he said, there was a funny thing when he was asked about the video tribute, and he was asked, "Would you watch it?" Would I watch? Yeah, I'd watch, but I don't care. It doesn't make a difference. Like he does such a. It's a funny thing. Again, everybody kind of realizing the Jimmy Butler thing. The dude is such a contrarian when it comes to media sessions because he wants to make sure so much that you don't bring up something that he didn't either come up with or leads into, especially from a positive perspective. He wants to kind of feel like he's too cool for school on all of it. Right. But he obviously is very like any human is, he said it. Who doesn't want to be wanted? So like if you get to a spot where they kind of didn't want you anymore and you want to solidify what that legacy is, you don't think this stuff is all talked about and kicked around by all his people? Like it's such a silly thing. And I think it would just do everybody I think it would probably do him probably a little bit of a mental ease if he was just like, yeah, you know what? I liked my time there. And also, and I'm not even talking about the whole, we did some fun things, but we didn't win what we were supposed to. I actually thought some of that stuff was fair to say, to criticize, to talk about his era. But this whole, I don't know why anybody would be upset. You don't?
Like he contradicts himself all the time, and I said it on the show the other day. Like everything is nothing to him, and everything is everything all at once. He comes out on media day and says, "Oh, I don't care about getting paid. I've made a ton of money," and yet you force your way out because you're not giving the contract extension. Which one is it? You're contradicting yourself. You said here, he had quotes immediately after the trade. You just want to feel wanted, and then today he's like, "I don't care about being the bad guy. If I have to be the bad guy, that's okay." It's like, okay, well, which one is it? Do you want to feel wanted, or are you okay being a bad guy and not being wanted by anybody? So it is sort of funny how we kind of parse into these things. The one other thing I'll say about the initial quote we were talking about too, asking Heat fans to look at the Heat the same way. Dude, you don't play on the Heat anymore. These are Heat fans. At the end of the day, they're going to forgive the organization and want the organization to do well, right? Like that's just how fans work. Like I don't know why we have to explain this.
And it's crazy. But it's also like, well, they have, Jimmy. Like, trust me, there are plenty of fans have been pissed off at this. There's been plenty of fans who are pissed that, you're not here anymore or that it didn't work out or whatever the reasons are.
The fire Riley, fire Spo, like all that stuff. It's alive and well in the comments, and I'm sure you've heard the same thing in your comments.
Of course. Everything is, and why wouldn't it be? It's the worst losing streak they've had in Eric Spoelstra's tenure as head coach. It's, the worst we're seeing since the time they've tanked. This is so like, hey, feather in his cap to that. Like Jimmy Butler, usually when he leaves, the team gets worse and the team he goes to gets better. That's a fact. I mean, it has been. But I don't understand this idea of, I hope the Heat get theirs too. It's like, okay, like good. Sure, but you know that like you kind of sped all of that along by not doing your job.
Right. I have a few speed round questions before I let you go here, and I really do appreciate the time. But do you think you already kind of hit on it, but do you think that this team is better than what they've at least shown since the trade deadline?
I don't know. It's such an interesting question because it's like I people keep saying, and I've been victim to this too, thinking like, how is this team not able to beat the Bulls? How is this team not able to beat some of the teams that they lost to on this losing streak? How do they look so competitive against OKC or whatever good team it is? And it just falls apart on them. And people will just go to, well, team games in the fourth quarter just get tight. And that's all right. But dude, we're talking like things that only the Jazz are doing, things that are like amongst the worst in the league. So I can't say that they're amongst the worst in the league. Like, we all have eyeballs. We know what that looks like.
Right.
So I think so, but I don't know, dude. I never see, and that's why I gotta like chalk it up to like intangible stuff. Like people say, do you think this team is mentally weak? And I think they are. I don't think you can really have an argument against it. And I hate to say that because I think Bam Adebayo is a winning player. I think Andrew Wiggins has shown himself to be a champion. Tyler Hero had an all-star year. Davion Mitchell seems like he does the right things. Yeah, they got a couple young guys in there like Kalel, who's going to have his rookie moments. But what, like, Wes, we all sit here, dude, and it's like, what is this? What is at the core of all of this that they see the first sign of adversity and turtle up and they just can't take it anymore? It's really, really odd.
I don't know that they're mentally weak, but I would say they're mentally worn down. And maybe so they're mentally weak in this moment. And that's pretty understandable. Like they try to do this whole like stick our head in the sand and pretend that none of this is happening with the Jimmy Butler thing. Like literally Eric Spoelstra coming out and being like, what problem? There's no problem here. And then Jimmy Butler being like, I hate it here. Like 2 minutes afterwards. And this is a team that just feels like it needs therapy. Like you can't just ignore trauma. You can't ignore things that are bothering you. It's going to catch up to you at some point and it's going to materialize in some kind of way. And it just feels like that's what is happening over this time. So I'll answer my own question. I think they're better than what they are or what they had been. I don't think that this team is lose 10 games in a row bad. I think they're better than that. I don't think that they're way better than that. I think they're probably about a 500 team-ish when everything's healthy. I would like to see them win a game when Andrew Wiggins doesn't have to score 42 points, but we'll see.
I was actually happy to see that, though, because one of the things that's frustrated me with Andrew Wiggins is it feels like he has a good quarter and then, people are like, or it's, and honestly, this is kind of like a Heat thing, too, where like a guy will just rock for a quarter. Like this happened with the Bam game against Detroit. And like, I'll put some of it on Bam, but like they came out of that game and he's cooking. And then it's like, all right, let's set some guys up. And I think like, dude, feed the hot hand every once in a while. Like it's okay for a guy to go out and just chuck up 25 shots if he's feeling it that night. So I was happy that Andrew Wiggins had a game. I understand it's against the Hornets, but I was like, oh, look at that. The Heat actually just like, who's having a good game tonight? Andrew Wiggins. Give him the ball.
Give me your quick yes or no answer. Do you want the Heat to tank?
Man, I watched Cooper Flagg yesterday, and it was before the Hornets game, and I've been
watching DJ Edgecombe closely.
I haven't even gone down the whole lot, but I was like, man, that would be such a nice bounce if that went their way.
10-1 last year. Hawks number 10 odds all the way to 1.
I would say if they tanked, I wouldn't hate it. Just because, one, they're not going to win 2 play-in games anyway. Like, I don't think that the way they are inconsistent to win 2 play-in games on the road against that cluster of teams that gives them a lot of problems. Yes. So to me, I don't really have a big problem with it. The Dallas Mavericks did it a couple of years ago and got lively, and it was a huge piece for them.
Yep.
And you know what? The Miami Heat have done a lot of stuff via pride this year to show, hey, this is where us sticking by our guns. You can lay your principles down a little bit. I wouldn't have a big problem with it. When I saw the injury report come out before yesterday or a couple days ago when Bam and Tyler first peaked up, I was like, oh, what are we seeing here? I thought for a minute, I was like, oh, are they actually doing this? So I really wouldn't have a problem if they tanked. Do I want them to? I guess I'm being soft and saying no, but I know they're not gonna. Like
Right,
I know
that's the
that
thing.
I know they're not gonna.
Right.
But if they
But if they were to end up with one of the worst, or one of the, I should be right, if they end up with one of the best 8 odds in the lottery, you might feel good on lottery night about it.
And I also am like, people are talking about this whole, well, then you have 2 unprotecteds that are out there.
Mm-hmm.
And this is my thought on that. I know this organization is not going to put itself in a position where like that's going to be a thing where they're going to leave themselves out to dry to not have a team that's going to have that really hurt them. We're like, oh, they're going to give up the number 1 pick. Like, there's going to be a scenario, whether that is going and getting an old Kevin Durant or what. The only one that I guess that would kind of kill is any dreams of getting Zion, because obviously you always have the risk of Zion getting hurt, and then that would really string you out. But man, it would be fun. But
I also don't think that. I mean, the real risk when we talk about the risk of losing an unprotected pick and kind of leaving yourself open to that is just embarrassment. You're only risking embarrassment,
right?
Like, you're not going to have that pick regardless. So whether or not that pick ends up being number 1 or number 10, it doesn't, number 25, it doesn't matter. You're just risking embarrassment. And that is a real thing for most front offices. But I don't think Andy Ellsberg or Adam Simon or Pat Riley or Eric Spoelstra, none of those guys are getting fired if that pick ends up number 1. The Heat are unique in that way. Last thing here, and then I'll let you go. What's one controversial food take that maybe you've recently revealed, or something that's come up in your life recently, or just you could think of?
Man, I like ketchup on white rice with Chinese food.
Wow. That felt like a lot for you to admit that just now.
I see by the way you're looking at me that it was.
So,
I don't know what I'm more embarrassed by.
Are we talking like a beef and broccoli situation?
No. So, like, I will get like General Tso's chicken with a side of white rice, and I'll be like, "This white rice is a little too bland. Go with it some ketchup. That'll spice it up, and it's good."
You've heard of soy sauce, right?
Got to go with every package there. Like, I don't have a soy sauce container at my house, so then I'm going a lot of packets there. And I'm not like the biggest soy sauce fan by itself on its own anyway. So there you go. That is probably my most controversial, and I can tell it is just by the look on your face.
You know what? I'm not going to be a hypocrite here, because I just did a whole thing about how I think ketchup is the best condiment. And so if I gave you a problem with you putting it on white rice, that would be hypocritical on me, and I won't do that. I'm not going to put myself in that position. So I'm here for it, and I might even try it one of these days.
What has been yours? Like, when this all started as a bit, what was yours to kick this off?
It's, I mean, the usual. I think the whole is a hot dog a sandwich? I think a hot dog is a taco. I think it's basically the same shape.
A taco. But wouldn't a taco like that has to be a tortilla, does it not?
I mean, it does, but it's like Taco Bell makes all these things that are barely tortillas anymore. I'm just like, look at the shape of a hot dog. It's closer to a taco than it is a sandwich and anything else.
It's like a taquito.
A little bit.
All right.
But a taquito is more like a corn dog, I think, because you have the whole thing goes all the way around.
That's fair. That is. It's a fried encased snack/meal.
Yeah, you build a hot dog in a very similar way to the way that you would build a taco. So that's where I'm at here.
All right.
I think there's more meat on this bone, but we can leave it there for now. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app. And, of course, you know where to find Tobin. WQAM 560, 10 to 2 with Leroy, Monday through Friday. I love your guys' show. I listen all the time. And I'll see you at the game on Tuesday, man.
I'll see you at the game, man. Boots on the ground.
Boots on the ground.